not necessarily motivational, but it's eye-opening, and it really, I think, helps cope with a lot of things or make you understand like tragedy a little bit more. I'll just start by reading the back of it. Psychiatrist Frankel memoir has riveted generations of readers with its descriptions of life in Nazi death camps and its lessons for spiritual survival. Based on his own experience and the story of his patients, Frankel argues that we cannot avoid suffering, but we can choose how to cope with it, find meaning in it, and move forward. At the heart of his theory, known as logotherapy, is a conviction that the primary human drive is not pleasure, but the pursuit of what we find meaningful. Man's Search for Meaning has become one of the most influential books in America. It continues to inspire us all to find significance in the very act of living. So as you can see, this is not a light-hearted book, and if that's something that bothers you, I wouldn't read it. He goes into some pretty serious detail of his experiences in a concentration camp, and overall, it's definitely not a happy book, but I still think everybody should read it. Whether or not you agree with the way he talks about coping with, in his case, the tragedy of being in the horrendous conditions, the inhuman conditions of a Nazi work camp, I still think it's very eye-opening. I have another book in this collection that is not very happy at all, but the next one will be a little bit better, I think. But I wanted to start with this one because it's just highly recommended, especially if you struggle with anything in your life, just to kind of help teach you some coping mechanisms, for lack of a better term. I'll just stop there. Next is Speaker for the Dead by Orson Scott Card. This is actually the sequel to Ender's Game, and I personally like this a lot more than Ender's Game. Ender's Game is a fantastic book, but this book is just, it goes into a whole different concept and realm that I really enjoy. As you can see, it's been heavily abused by myself. go through interviewing and talking to them and trying to figure out kind of what brings, like what allows that to happen. And a lot of it is just making sure you find purpose, find meaning. And so this book kind of has that similar concept to A Man's Search for Meaning, where it's about finding some sort of purpose to keep you going. Because without it, you've become miserable. And ultimately that's what either kills you or at least makes you live a miserable life. But in this case, it's another highly recommended book. The next book is another inspirational book. This one is very easy, a lot more lighthearted than the other two quote-unquote inspirational books I have listed. It is called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. It's probably the best inspirational book I've ever read. It almost feels like a satire to the world of inspirational books, but it's not. And the author does a really good job at just telling stories of why it's really important to just not always care. A lot of things don't matter, and ultimately it's your own happiness that does matter. So I'd read the book. I'm not very good at summarizing this book particularly, but it's a very, very, very good book. I also read this book not too long ago. I'm trying to figure out where I bought it. I don't remember. The next book is another kind of dark book. It's not inspirational by any means, but it's definitely brings up some dark content that is very relevant, unfortunately, right now. But it's called Give a Boy a Gun by Todd Strasser. This book is a fictional book, but it talks a lot of the topics that school shooters and kind of what puts somebody into the situation to think that that's what needs to happen. The back reads, "For as long as they can remember, Brendan and Gary have been mercilessly teased and harassed by the jocks who rule Middletown High. But not anymore. Stealing a small arsenal of guns from a neighbor, they take their classmates hostage at a school dance in the panic of the desperate situation. It soon becomes clear that only one thing matters to Brendan and Gary, and that is revenge." Now, I read this book when I was in middle school, which is probably not the best time to read a book like this, but it brings up a lot of that whole connection of bullying and not seeking help in proper forms by either abusing alcohol or pills or whatever. It's actually, it's probably worded right here the best. Haunting and harrowing. I mean, the protagonists of the books are the villains. But also have been abused, and it creates a very interesting story that is very unfortunately relevant in today's society still. And it's written in a super satisfying book. Next is The Restaurant at the End of the Universe. Facing annihilation at the hands of warmongers is a curious time to crave tea. It could only happen to the cosmically displaced Arthur Dent and his comrades as they hurtle across the universe in a desperate search for a place to eat. I mean, you can almost tell by just the way that it's all worded. It's a very silly book, but it talks about some very interesting topics in a sense. It really brings up some parts of our society that is messed up, just in a way that's